Hello everyone, and this is a video covering the new erosion tool in Houdini 17. Okay, so this is technically an update to my terrains training. So with Houdini 17, they kind of rewrote the entire erosion system, which is actually a lot faster now to calculate, but it also has a ton of more options. So with this video, I'm trying to sort of cover most of them. Now, one of the things I will definitely recommend before you watch this or even after you watch this is you should definitely watch the Houdini 17 Terrain Masterclass from Side Effects, because this is like a 2-hour video where Ari Danish sort of goes through the whole terrain stuff and goes into a lot of depth with all the various settings of the erode tool. And there's also a separate 30-minute video on the new scatter operator. So I definitely suggest watching this. I'm not covering the scatter tool in this. I might create another video for it. Right now I'll just go through the erode, all the settings in the erode node. Okay, now this is not a basic level video, so I'm not going through how to create a terrain, but I'll just sort of give you a brief overview of what I've made. Okay, so or how I've made this. Okay, so what I have is I have my basic height field, which is 500 by 500, and I'm mixing two different noise maps. Okay, so I have one noise map which is essentially an alligator noise, and I'm using gain and bias to sort of turn it into essentially cliffs. And then on the other side, I have the second height field noise, where what I'm doing is I'm using clipping to sort of turn it into plateaus. Okay, and then I did a remap to just sort of adjust it a little bit. And then I'm using a height field layer to mix them. Okay, so I have my base scale and I have my secondary layer. And so I'm just sort of mixing them together. Okay, and then a third noise map to just, because there are some areas which are extremely smooth, like these areas are really smooth. So a third noise map just to sort of, distort them a little bit. And then finally like a distort map to just add a little extra noise. Okay, and then in order to get fairly interesting erosion, what you want to do is you want to mask out areas. Otherwise, it will just erode the whole landscape, which is not bad, but it doesn't look very nice. Yeah, so what you want to do is firstly, you mask by feature, and then usually I mask by slope mixed with like a mask by height. So if I don't want like any erosion to happen, up here, I can just lower the height. Okay, so there'll be no erosion happening after a certain height, but I want a little bit, so I'm just going to keep it there. And then you can control the angle, like whatever is the slope angle. Okay, and then blur it a little bit, because if you don't blur it, the lines get too sharp. Like wherever it's eroding, if you erode by mask, you'll get like very sharp lines. So you should blur it a little bit. And then finally adding a second noise to the mask so that you can blank out certain patches. Like I don't want, like, so this area will get very little erosion. So you can actually like, control areas like that. See, so I can actually just say, okay, like these areas won't have any erosion at all. Okay, so once you've done that much, we'll now apply like the erode node. Okay, so one of the things that has happened is if you type erode, you'll actually get about 4 different options. So these ones, the erode, hydro, precipitation, and thermal, these are more like atomic nodes that combine together to build the erode node. So if you want to build something custom, you can actually do it with these. I haven't explored these too much. They seem to be a little complicated to control. But traditionally, you just want to take like the height field erode. Okay, so once you've taken the height field erode, just connect the incoming terrain to both the inputs, because you want to control the mask as well. And it's fairly simple. Okay, and then one more thing is it tends to show the mask, which I don't want to see. So I'm just going to take a mask clear and just remove that, like after the erode. Okay, so I can just see the landscape. Okay, so I'll just set up a few things. I'm going to set up the visualization. So I'll just come in here and I'll just say visualize. Okay, so for some reason it wasn't showing me, like it continued showing me the previous colors, but it apparently decided to reset. Okay, so I'm going to just change these colors a little bit. So I don't want the water, I just want the debris, and I'm going to remove these. I'll make this slightly darker, like give it more like desert colors. This I'll push a little bit towards, like desaturate and push a little bit there. Yeah, okay. So just sort of, this doesn't update automatically. Like changing values here tends to update automatically, but changing the height ramp for some reason doesn't. So every time you make a change, you have to hit compute range and then it sort of updates it. Alright, so let's get started. So you have, there are two main areas that we need to cover. The first is the main area and then you have the advanced area. Now, I'm not going to go through everything in the advanced area because there's like far too many options, but I'll go through the major ones so you can sort of understand what you need to do in order to get a result. Okay, so you have the global erosion rate and then you have the hydro area and the thermal area. I'm going to set a mask for both of these. So you can just click here and say mask. And by default, you can also paint a custom mask, but I'm just going to change this to mask, which is the one that we have, and change both of these to mask. I'm going to turn off thermal for now. So we can just play this. It calculates fairly fast and you don't even need to go too deep into it. Like usually a level of 10 is good enough. So you can see like you're getting some amount of debris sort of forming in there. Okay, let me just change the debris color so you can see that. So I'm just going to make it lighter. Yeah, okay, that is good. So you can see like it is sort of, you have like water flowing down and which is causing the debris to collect. Okay, so the first thing is you have the bank angle. Okay, so wherever you see a value called angle, what that means is that the lower this value is, the more faster or the more it will cut the terrain. Okay, if the bank angle is too high, it's like everything remains fairly steep and like it will only do it on the steep areas. The flat areas tend to remain fairly normal. So it doesn't really do too much erosion. But if I lower this down, if I get the bank angle to say 8, now you'll start getting, a lot more. Like you'll see it eating up the terrain much more than what it was doing before. So that's the one thing with bank angle. Plus you can increase like spread iterations. So you'll get like, it's spreading out much more. So you can see like you have much more water here now or much more debris than what was there before. Yeah. Which in comparison to before, like if I keep the spread iterations down to about like 40, 45, you'll see that it doesn't spread out as much. See, you don't have like the same at frame 10, you barely have anything. Okay, now in the advanced area, you have again things broken up into hydro erosion, thermal erosion, and precipitation. So hydro erosion has a few interesting little things that you can work with. So the first one is the removal rate. So if the removal rate is positive, it's going to remove the debris. Okay, like if I get it like say 0.8, you'll notice that you'll get the cuts, but you won't see the debris. Okay, so the colors will more or less remain unchanged. See, you're getting like a lot of these cuts, but the debris is completely missing. So what's happening is sort of like it's evaporating or it's not letting it collect at all. And if you go negative, then if you want like more debris to be seen, so negative is a good value, like keep it around like minus 0.8 or something, you'll see like a lot of debris then. See, there you go. It also tends to make it very noisy. Okay, like you can see here, it gets very noisy. But we'll correct that, like towards the end of it, I'll show you how to correct that. But see, now it's a little too extreme. But you can see like it's really sort of like flooding the whole thing and collecting a lot of debris. So usually it's kept around 0.1, but I figure slightly negative value is actually better. Yeah, I think like minus 0.1 is a nice value to have. Okay, another thing you can do is you have grid bias. So if grid bias is positive, you have stuff like you have things remaining more on the slopes. And if grid bias is negative, it tends to remain more on the ground. So again, you have like options to choose. Honestly, I think you have like far too many options now. So it's very easy to get lost. Okay, another option that you get, which is actually like the erodibility adjustment. So this is actually a nice area, because what you can do is if you get the ramp iterations to 0, it starts the erosion a lot faster. So if ramp iterations is 0, and then even if I come up to about 6, you'll see it eroding a lot faster than what it was doing before. So like if I keep this up to say around 10, and we come to frame 6, so you'll notice it doesn't really do as much. But if you keep it to 0, so if you want the erosion to start very quickly, then you can usually keep it to 0. Actually, you can keep it to 0 anyways, because unless you're doing an animation of it, you basically just want an eroded result. So that's not a bad idea. Okay, along with this, you also get a slope factor here. So if I get this slope factor really low, you'll get more erosion overall. See, you have like a lot of debris now. Then if I keep it to like really high, so see, you don't have like as much. So again, depending on how much you want it to happen, you kind of adjust these particular values. Okay, now one of the things that is actually probably the most effective is the precipitation area. Okay, so the precipitation area is like, if you really want to erode the landscape, precipitation is quite nice. Okay, so what you can do is if I increase the precipitation amount, that's like how much rainfall you're getting or how much water is there. See, so as you increase precipitation, it kind of really starts to eat up everything. And along with that, if I increase the density, it will really start to eat things up. See, there you go. So this is what happens with like very high precipitation and debris. Like your entire landscape is pretty much being washed away. But what you can do is, like, if you keep them to a medium value and if you increase the evaporation rate, then it's sort of like the water evaporates a lot faster. It doesn't eat up as quickly as it was before. But yeah, if you want to like show some areas being washed away completely, this is not a bad way to do it. Like if I come into visualization and let's say if you make it green. Okay, so let's keep this slightly lower. Okay, so this is as far as using hydro erosion is concerned. The other one, especially if you're doing something like this, you want to do like thermal erosion. So what we can do is I'm going to get the hydro erosion rate to like really low, and we can work with the thermal erosion. So thermal erosion is like, it's heat based. And let's also like increase the erosion rate, because just increasing erodibility doesn't help. You have to increase the erosion rate as well. So there you go. So you'll see like it starts to eat up at the slopes. Thermal erosion is really good if you want to do, sand dunes and stuff. You'll see it sort of eating up very nicely at this point. So you'll get like very nice results happening there. You can see that, in the background where it kind of, it makes it into like these nice little cliffs and everything. So thermal erosion is very nice for these things. Okay. And again, you have the cut angle option. So the lower it is, the more sand you'll get. See, there you go. You don't want to keep it that low, because what it does is if you keep it very low, it tends to generate like these spikes. Okay. Like you can see, like, you end up getting like these very sharp, jagged edges. Usually about 30 is good. So I can keep it around like 30, 35, 40. Let's keep it to 40. Yeah, so one of the options you get here is what I realized was you get something called as debris flow. Now, if you keep the debris flow very low, it creates very sort of fine lines. And if you keep the debris flow, if you keep the spread iterations too high, you won't get, like, you lose the fine lines. You'll get like very large chunks of sand, like everywhere. See, so you'll lose like it doesn't show up as much. You'll just get like these collections of sand. So it has eaten up, but it's just like, it's not creating the fine lines. So usually around like 15-20 is good. So you get the fine lines and you get, everything else. Okay, so we can just adjust a few things now. So I'll increase the precipitation a little bit, and we'll also bring back the the hydro erosion, but just a little bit, like not too much. I want to keep more of thermal in a place like this. See, so you'll get like a fairly decent result. Usually like a frame 10 is good enough for, earlier on, I used to go up to about frame 25 to get a decent result. Now about, 5 or 10 is good enough. Alright, so one more thing to remember is that previously the erode node also used to generate the flow values. Right now it doesn't do that. Like with the new version, if you press I, you'll see that there is no flow anymore. So what has happened is that there is a separate flow node which you can apply. So if I take the height flow field and you just connect it, you'll see that it automatically, it calculates the flow. And you can either copy it to mask. So I can probably add this to the mask and work that way, or you can directly even say adjust height and it'll actually like just cut into the landscape. So if you don't want to do erosion and if you just want to create like a relatively water-based or like you have a lot of rivers in your landscape and you just want to create those cut lines, this is actually not a bad way to do it. The options are fairly simple. You have like if I just keep it to mask, you can lower or adjust the spread iterations. Okay, you have smoothing value, so you can smoothen it out if you want. You have the rain amount, so the higher it is, the more the more it will erode. And then you have rain density. So you have like those two options, and then you can also have granular or smooth. So you have like two different options. So what I can try is I can take, let's say if we can mix these together. Yeah, let's just try layer. Yeah, so let's take a height field layer, and let's take the first one and the second one. But I just want to adjust the mask, and let's do add. Yeah, so there you go. So we are adding the, we're adding the flow field into our existing, like this was before, and then this is with the flow field. But let's do one thing. Let's just lower the amount. I don't want too much. Okay. And let's see how different this is from, the previous result. Oh, okay. That's pretty extreme. Because now it has like all of these fine lines where it could go down. So it kind of ate up, it started to eat up a lot more. It does look nice. It actually looks pretty nice. But let's do one thing. We might need to adjust this a little bit. Yeah, so let's make a few. I'm going to reduce the rain density and I'm going to reduce the rain amount. Yeah, so we just have like fairly fine lines. I'll also smoothen it out a little bit and maybe lower, the mask. Yeah, there you go. See, that's a much better result. So you have like a lot of these nice areas where it can kind of cut through. And we can try and like, let's do one thing. Let's increase the angle a little bit. Yeah, this is nice. Okay, there you go. So this is what you can do. So you can sort of mix the flow field into it. Let's see if it's gotten the flow field in there. No. Okay. Okay, let's do one thing. This seems to be a little bit complicated. So let's remove the flow from here and I'll just add it here on top. And what that should do is, and I'll just change this to add. So I'll get it, right from the beginning. So you will have the flow field in there. Yeah, so I don't need this anymore. Yeah, this is fine. So hopefully we should get our result and we should still have the flow field in there. Because if you want to output the flow field, it has to be available within the attribute values. Yeah, and so if I check it now, I should be able to see, yeah, there we go. So we have the flow. So what that means is if I come in here and I type it in, I don't know if it will show up or not. Yeah, there you go. So we have the flow field and we can then control it a little bit. Let's just make it like really dark. Or actually let's do one thing. Let's set this to debris. Yeah, and let's set this to flow. And I just want to replace the color. So copy parameter, paste values. Okay, yeah, there you go. That looks better. Yeah, let them both be relatively similar colors. Okay, so this is essentially it. Okay, so this is as far as the new erode tool is concerned and how to use the flow field along with it. Now, one of the things I realized is at some points it tends to generate a fairly sort of grainy and pixelated result. Like no matter how high your resolution goes, it still tends to remain that way. So what I realized is it's a good idea to kind of smoothen out or to blur this a little bit. Okay, like you can see here, you're getting like a fair bit of grain. And this, if you output like a 4K map and you decide to render it, it will show up in the render. Like you will get this pixelation, quantization sort of happening within the displacement map. So it's a good idea to sort of blur the height field beforehand. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll just add like a blur. So we'll take a height field blur, and if you just plug it in, it'll tend to blur it a little too much. Okay, which is not what we want. What we want to do is we want to use like the debris field to control where the blur is happening. So connect the incoming mask into this, but in the mask layer, use the debris. Okay, and you'll get something like this. But what you want to do is you want to switch on mask aware blur, and see that is really effective. So what it does is it smoothens out like the debris field. And so if you want to get like really smooth sand, this is a pretty nice way to do it. What you can do is you can, when you're rendering it, you can add an additional bump map, but you won't get like what was happening before is you were seeing like, you can see it, you can see like the pixels in there. Of course, this is not very high res, but even if you go very high res, you still tend to see it. So usually I keep it around 1 or 2, which is good enough. So you see, you get like a little bit of smoothing, but you get rid of the weird pixelization that is happening. And along with this, you can also, like if you want to smoothen out the debris map, you can do that as well, right? So what you can do is you can take a second blur and like don't mask it, just blur the debris. And you can see like it's blurring out the debris field. So not too much, just a little bit, just to sort of smoothen out everything. So this is important, like blurring it has become a little important now because the final result, as I said, seems to be a little bit grainy. So let's do one thing. Let's just get a slightly higher result. Okay, so I'm just going to come to the height field and I'll get it down to like 0.25. The more you increase this, you'll see the flow field will increase as well. See, there you go. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll just take it to about 5 or 6 and we'll see what's the result. Yeah, so there you go. See, this is pretty decent now. So as I said, like having the smoothing really helps out because if we look at it without the smoothing, see, you'll notice like it's very, very grainy in these areas. So the blurring sort of helps out a little bit, makes it smoother. So yeah, so this is the new erode tool in Houdini 17. A lot of it has changed, but it's not too complicated. Like as I said, the main areas to sort of control are, you want to control like the removal rate. So as I said, like if you go into negative, you'll get more sand. If you go into positive, you won't see any sand. And then grid bias, if you keep it to negative, the sand will be more on the ground. And if you keep it to positive, it will be more on like the cliffs. And then you can control like the slope factor to define how much it should erode. Okay, like if you want more erosion, lower the slope factor, like it'll erode everything. And then finally, you have the precipitation, which is really important. Like if you increase precipitation, it'll eat up. It's like there's more water, so it's just going to eat up everything. And then finally, you have spread iterations for the debris. Okay, so the higher the spread iterations, you'll get very large chunks of sand. Like you won't get it spreading. You won't get the very fine lines that you were getting before. So if you increase it too much, you'll just get like big chunks of sand lying around, but not the fine rivulets that you were getting. And then also, as I said, like you want to be able, if you want the flow field, then you need to add the flow node over here. Okay, like do it before everything else and then do your masking. So you can add it into the mask. If you don't want it, just, don't add it. It's perfectly fine. But yeah, adding it in gives you, much more sort of a detailed result. It looks nice. All right, so this is basically it. So this is the new erode node and the flow field node, and how to use it to, do erosion on landscapes in Houdini 17. So I'll attach this file along with the video. And if you have any questions regarding this, you can ask me in the comments, or you can message me on Twitter or Instagram, I guess, or write me an email, whatever is preferable. And that's basically it.